Okay, so the topic under discussion tonight, or more than discussion, experience is going to be about centering. And I suspect that most of us are fairly experienced practitioners on the mat, and therefore we kind of know what centering is. But as we discussed just before this record went on, quite a few of us come from the Ki Aikido tradition, and kind of centering to me meant, you know, keep one point, touch there, be aware there, oh, I'm centered. And it is very, very simple when you think about it like that. And I never bothered to really think about it much when I was taught that that was a technique how to achieve center. But I've kind of been forced to do it recently. One because I've come across various practices where they do all sorts of forms of centering from a completely different direction to that. And secondly, because I'm trying to put together an online course, a recorded course, and one of the subjects I'm talking about is centering. So it's really focused my mind on the subject. So I'm going to share some of the stuff that's come out from when I started writing about it, what it really was as far as I was concerned. So would anyone like to give us a dictionary definition they think of what centering actually means?
Well, I love definitions. I can see two different aspects, what the experience of centering is and what its results are, and what the technique is by which you achieve that state and those results.
Okay. Would you like to hear what the dictionary definition is?
Sure.
No, I want to hear what Paul has to say.
Well, I'm very happy. I think he just told you, didn't he?
Well, no, he said there were three sides to it, but he didn't say what any of them were.
Yes, I did, sort of, in an empty sort of way. One type of definition is pointing to the experience of what it's like and how it affects you on the mat and in your life. The other kind of a definition is to say what you do to achieve that.
Okay.
And there's an awful lot of room for all kinds of experiences and techniques, I think.
Okay. So I'll come back with the dictionary definition, but it does seem to me that maybe it's appropriate to start with the centering technique. So would you like to do that?
Me? Sure. Well, there's a number of them. The basic one that I work with, I'll show you something I've been playing with just this morning. Okay. If I radiate from the core, I'm standing on one foot, have had Parkinson's for 17 years. And when I get it, when I'm awake, there's a sense of radiating equally in all directions and not biasing with fear or anger or anything.
Good. Okay. Well, I'm going to give you, I'm going to take you through a centering. It's something that we did with Koritoshi Maruyama Sensei. But I think it's a good one to start with because there's a physical aspect to it, which I think is really nice. So do you want to follow me?
Sure.
Why not?
Great. Okay.
To the ends of the earth, Quentin, as always.
And beyond. Okay, so if you can find a space where you can kneel and be comfortable, that would be great. If you can't, then feel free to sit. You're going to sit in Seiza, if you can. Just put your palm left on top of right and just sit straight. And in a second, I'm going to ask you, I'll explain what we're going to do. We're going to be rocking from front to back, and then we're going to rock from side to side, and then we're going to go to the diagonals, and then we're going to go in circles, and then we'll reverse it and go in circles. You're going to be working to your own personal boundaries. So if I folded over like that, I know it's way too far. So there's kind of, I'm happy here, but I'm not happy there. I'm happy here, but I'm not happy here. And likewise, sideways, and et cetera, et cetera. So you're working within your own tolerance of what's a comfortable range for you to work within. Okay, so I'm going to ask you just to shut your eyes and just follow what I say. So we're going to shut our eyes. We're sitting straight now. And now we're going to work front to back. So we rock forward and back. forward and back.
Are we going too far back?
And back. You go as far back as you want to go. Forward and back. Forward and back. Forward and back. And now we're going to go side to side. So left to right. 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 Front left to right back. 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 Front right to left 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 back. Now you're going to go in a clockwise direction. Just spin your body in a clockwise direction. And I want you to imagine that there's a marble in a bowl and you're taking the marble to the rim of the bowl. So you don't want it to fall out. You want to hold it on the rim as you circle. And now you're going to reverse the direction. You're going to go anti-clockwise, but keep that marble on the rim of the bowl. And now you're going to slow the circles down. You're going to make it run off the rim, and then ultimately it's going to settle in the center. So the circles get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And eventually you're going to settle to a place where it's still going in your head, but the movement is imperceptible. And hopefully you feel really calm and settled. Okay, so ordinarily speaking, if we were doing a centering exercise and we wanted to know whether it worked or not, we'd be working in pairs if you come from the Key Society tradition, and they would test you to see if you were well and truly centered. We can't do that because we're all in rooms separately, apart from maybe Nick and Laura and Alec and Liz. But you're going to play the game. You're going to pretend that you're on your own, because I hope I've come up with a way of testing yourself to see whether you're on track or not. Okay, so place your fingers together, your thumb and your finger together like this. Okay, place your thumb and the other finger through it. Make sure that you're sitting nice and aligned and you feel comfortable. Okay, and then try to force your fingers apart. I'm struggling. Okay, so now I want you to deliberately come forward so that it's a little bit uncomfortable. And now test.
Ah, very interesting.
I hope that everybody found that now their finger and their thumb disappeared. Did you?
No, no, I found that it was comfortable at this point. So as long as I was comfortable, I think it's okay.
Okay, so you've got to take yourself to a place where you're not comfortable, Paul. So
No,
maybe you're going to go off way to the side like that.
No, it just makes me want to punch somebody who's pushing me.
Well, if you want to punch somebody, then I suggest that you're not as comfortable as you should be.
No, I enjoy. I'm not trying to be obnoxious. I do it without trying, but I think the operative term is comfortable. I don't feel uncomfortable when I go off the line. I just feel different.
All right, then let's try a different variable for you, because if you've got great physical range, then that's absolutely fine. So I want you to think of something that makes you feel really, really good. So everybody can do this, okay? So I'm going to think of something that makes me feel really, really good. And test. I'm good. Okay, so now take yourself to an experience that was really very unpleasant in some way. It made you sad or angry or one of those things, depressed, and now try.
Yeah, that works.
Okay, fine. So it's just a question of what you're comfortable with and what you're not. Okay, so
Right.
you've got great range of movement. That's wonderful. So, but we have a method at least where when we go through stuff tonight, you can test to see whether what I'm saying is bullshit or not as far as you're concerned.
Hmm.
Seem fair?
Yes.
Good. Great. Okay. So the dictionary definition of centering is the concentration of attention or energy on something. So that's really helpful, isn't it? Anyone care to respond to the definition of the concentration of attention or energy on something is what centering means?
Well, I was thinking earlier that, you know, obviously I've come from the same background as you, Quentin. So I acknowledge and accept everything that you said. I totally agree with. But I was thinking, for me, the wider definition of centering now isn't just a physical thing, but it's mentally being centered. And I don't mean centered thinking about my one point or that bit, you know, the golden ball at the heart of your hips. I mean mentally centered and comfortable and one with yourself.
Are you trying to steal my lesson or what?
Oh, sorry.
No, you're absolutely on point, of course. But it's interesting, isn't it, that if you look at the dictionary definition, it doesn't really relate to what we practice at all. And I don't think I'll come to you in a second, Nick. It doesn't really relate at all to what I think people understand by centering, of those people that practice arts where centering is commonplace. So,
Right.
Nick, I'll just open it up for you, and then I'll tell you a bit more.
So just I wanted to ask about, like, you know, which dictionary are you using? Kind of like which dictionary definition? Kind of like
Okay.
from a website?
Yes, but I looked at a number of them, and I didn't find anything any more helpful than that on the subject.
Okay, because I think for me, kind of like I'm trying to think as a physicist, when you have concentration of energy, and kind of like, you know, for me, kind of like it always immediately comes to mind like a geometrical object, but potentially kind of like, you know, you have something solid, you may have like a center of gravity or a center of mass, kind of like, you know, conditions, but like, you know, both center of mass and center of gravity would coincide, and kind of like physical processes that could occur from there.
Okay, so yeah, totally got it. So in the exercise that we've just experienced, I love that exercise because it's an exercise where you are in center and you move out of center and you come back to center and you move out of center and you go around the center and then you settle absolutely on center. So it's a very physical exercise. It is a concentration of energy in that hara, the one point as it's described in Ki Aikido. And I think there is that aspect to centering, but there's the stuff also that Piers is talking about. And I think we could say a concentration of attention or energy on something. Most of the time, if we were talking about centering in Aikido, it would be that one point, that place below the navel. But equally, that definition is really, you could say that's almost like extending ki, focusing on something outside of yourself. And if you did that, you would be centered. So it's kind of there or thereabouts. I just don't think it's really, really helpful. So what's the purpose of centering? Well, I think it's to teach you to focus on the here and now. And it's to create a state where you are focused, relaxed, and grounded. And in so doing, to take power away from outside concerns and negative thoughts. So it's bringing you back to find your best self. That would be, I think, my definition of centering. It's a place where you are in a position to give your best to anything that comes your way. That doesn't mean to say you're invincible. It doesn't mean to say you solve all problems. It just means you have the best chance of doing that because you're clear-sighted and calm and relaxed. So how do you feel about that?
I've got a little thing to say there.
Marvelous.
I actually, again, been a bit influenced by Chu and the Tai Chi that we did last week. and was thinking about what we were doing, and you hold the emptiness, and I think I agree with everything. You know, of course, I agree with everything you've said, because I always do, as you know, and I look up to you. But also, I think when you center and you positively think about something like that, whether it's a mental centering or a physical centering, it allows you actually to not focus on anything else. And so it allows you to hold that emptiness and be ready for whatever you just said. So, you know, being your best self, because when you're ready, that's great. But if you're thinking about the tax return you didn't do, or the shops you didn't go and buy stuff at, or the train you've just missed, your head's all over the place. But you want to settle on that emptiness.
Yes. Yeah. We'll come back to that, Piers. Dan.
Whilst Piers looks up to you and he looks down to me and I know my place, there is a very good book which it was recommended to me for when I was with Hiroshi Ikeda Sensei, which the whole thing's about centering. And I'll just read one very small paragraph because it sort of encapsulates for me what centeredness is anyway. It says, developing centeredness is different than other types of training since it encompasses mind, tandem, full body awareness, movement and body alignment in relation to the ground and an attacking force. As long as we can think, as long as we can move, we can build our centeredness. Eventually, centeredness does not require your entire focus anymore because it has already developed to a certain point. It takes over and begins to guide your life. After that, you don't have to concentrate on it as fiercely anymore. Whatever you're doing, walking, working or gardening, centeredness automatically is growing stronger, affecting the way you deal with the world.
Yeah, there's lots in that I love. I think that's very true. It you know, as the more we practice it, the more it becomes a natural state, and we don't have to really think about it too much. And I don't know about you guys, but I kind of notice that if I'm unlucky enough to bump into a chair or a small child, they tend to go flying a long distance because I'm moving from center. Yes, I don't know if that's just unique to me or that's a common experience.
No, I had a situation walking down Oxford Circus, Oxford Street once, and I was with Jake and two of his friends at a birthday party. Yeah, I'd taken them out, and I was focusing on the kids, and someone, I mean, I was aware of what was happening, but a guy walked literally straight into me, and he thought I'd hit him. And I thought, Christ, I better apologize. I mean, he hit me, but it obviously hurt him. And I barely noticed it. And I thought, shit, I better apologize. So I did. So, so sorry, mate. But he bumped into me.
I remember a good skiing story. I was skiing down and I had one of those snowboarders stalking me from behind. And he didn't get it right and he cut me up. And we did clash. And I stayed standing and he bounced off a really long way, which was very, very satisfying.
Absolutely.
Quentin Piers, yeah, I've had precisely this sort of experience when I was commuting in London, and you know, it's a hard press of commuters and people bouncing off me, and it's quite embarrassing because I don't try to look after people. But I mean, there was a time when I was very glad that it happened, and it was when our daughter Catherine was really tiny, and I'd taken her to see the London Aquarium, and it was a really crowded day at that venue. And I'd taken her to the loo, and actually she was about 3 years old, something like that. It's quite small and vulnerable. I'd taken her to the toilet, and I was coming out the toilet cubicle, and there were two girls, and they were probably late teens, who tried to barge their way straight past us into the toilet cubicle. They couldn't wait a moment, for myself to get out with my toddler, and they ran into me, and they both bounced off me. And incredibly shocked, and of course, little toddler standing behind me. Like, it's not at all unusual that people bounce off mummy.
Excellent.
I don't think we'll go there, Liz. I don't think we should pursue that conversation. Okay, so let's. What's the purpose of centering then? Why do we bother? Warren, you've been very quiet, but you're very experienced. So I'd like to hear what you have to say.
I'm gonna stay. Actually, I'm formulating some thoughts here, and I'm not ready to jump in.
Okay, so what's the purpose of centering as far as you guys are concerned?
I think it's very relaxing.
Okay, so why do we concentrate so much on it in Aikido? Why do we talk about center, center, center all the time in Aikido?
To me, it feels like the core of your power.
Okay, Joanna.
So what drives everything else? So when you're centered and relaxed,
Or I
then
think
everything else works.
Okay, Joanna.
just before I talk, I think Paul wants to talk, and then I go.
Okay, thank you. From my peculiar way of hearing things, much of what we're talking about is very abstract. Be your best self. Don't lose your concentration. I don't know what that is, but if I find operational, solid, concrete ways of describing that, the equivalent exercise for me is think about something that you feel really bad about and notice the changes in detail in your body. And that's always a contraction or collapse of some kind. And if you open your body symmetrically, and then I teach you how, we're all talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
But I could never have followed any of those instructions when I was a baby Aikioist. They wouldn't have meant anything to me.
Okay, I'm going to buy the first one, be your best self, which I could expand on and explain in more detail if you as a student said to me, well, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
But I'm not necessarily buying the second one because we all know what concentration means.
Well, I didn't. Not till after I'd done 10, 15 years of Aikido.
Okay, well, I have to accept that. So I will. Joanna.
So hi everyone. I think I will mix kind of a question for everybody who has much more experience in Aikido. But also just like when I feel centering, that for me it's kind of pretty new for this couple of months couple of months. But it's like, it feels right to be here. I don't want to leave here. I don't want to leave this feeling, the energy, the place where I am, where my inner part is. It's not about my arm and my shoulders, but where is the place and the feeling and the energy that I am inside myself. But the question was, today on our online class, we were working this centering. So how do we stand up from here, just like we are in Senza? So I don't know, for us, since when we are born, we are teach just like, okay, I'm gonna stand up. I have to just throw all of my weight on my legs and my shoulders and think. We are not taught by our, I don't know, teachers, school, father, the nannies and stuff. How do we stand up from our center? Everything we do in our daily life, we need to grab a package from the grocery store. We need to get out of our luggage from the airport or from the car. It's always in any part of our bodies except our center. So I would like to ask you, everyone there, do you have the recognition that, okay, I'm gonna wash the dishes right now, I'm gonna do this centered, I'm gonna pick up the newspaper, I'm gonna just bend over, pick up the newspaper, and with the centering, how does this shift mode, or when it happened, if it still happened, what is the frequency of that?
Okay.
Can I answer that, Quen?
Sure.
My son is a neurologist, and he's been coming on to my online class, and he was explaining that the way we learn is obviously it's a neurotransmission from brain to muscles and through the nervous system, and initially that pathway is very small, and it's quite slow to make the connection. But the more you do something, the more it becomes part of your psyche, part of your subconscious. And so it's a question of practice. And the more you practice, the better you get at it. And the better you get at it, the less you have to think about it. And it becomes just part of your being.
So I want to expand on that and say that the basic answer to your fundamental question is, you want to use your body as it's engineered and structured in the most efficient way. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you don't learn bad paths as you get older. And then when people like us come along and say, well, that's not a good way to use your body, you have to unlearn all those bad habits. But Piers has been regularly talking about his grandchild in recent weeks and how he stands up, etc. He doesn't think about it. He does it in the most economic, energy efficient way. And I think when you're centered, all your movement is economic and efficient. It's just that through life, we sometimes learn bad habits. So for example, here I am sitting in front of a computer, and many of you will spend much of your day in front of a computer. And how many of you find yourself creeping forwards towards the computer as the day comes along? And then you wonder why your back hurts at the end of the day and your shoulders are tight, right? So you actually have to make a real conscious effort to sit. And Paul, you've told me how to have the right chair and work ergonomically at a computer. It's a really hard skill to learn because we learn so much bad stuff before that.
There's something else. It's again the level of description. Joanna, could you try doing something, if you would? Tighten your core muscles. You can all try this. Tighten the muscles in your chest, your belly, your pelvic floor, and then lean forward. And then come back, loosen all these muscles, especially loosen the pelvic floor muscles, and lean forward. Does it feel different to do it both ways?
Completely different.
Okay, I would say that the what you're looking for is criteria for centering that are concrete and you can tell when you're doing it. And that's not the same as centering. It's part of what you do to get centered. But if you open yourself in the pelvic floor and the hips, you have a much better chance of moving in an ergonomic, efficient way.
Okay, absolutely. So we have a range of movement we can do. Nico.
Well, I would like to echo what kind of like Paul said, because for me, when I'm hearing centering, I'm understanding first kind of like the physical aspect of like, structural and mechanical integrity and balance. So for example, what Paul was just saying, to me, it feels as if kind of like, you're aware of your body, your muscles, kind of like how everything moves. And you kind of like, you're assigning kind of like, muscle groups to do a specific function. So not just basically mindlessly, perhaps, this is maybe where the mind, comes into play. You're just moving aimlessly. You just kind of like, there's always a targeted kind of movement that is well thought of, perhaps rehearsed 1,000 times. And therefore kind of like the entire core is perhaps, or part of your core is engaged at all times. It helps you with the movement. Again, trying to find the least possible resistance in your movement itself.
Yeah. Okay, so I can think of a really, really simple example of that. Okay, so stand far away enough from something in front of you now. Everybody can try this with me. Okay, and make sure that I want you to touch something in front of you, but it's far enough away to feel like you imagine you're going to pick something off the table in front of you or the floor or something. Really reach for it. And how does that feel? Is it likely that that's what you would do given the choice? No. You'd walk forward and make it comfortable. So we have a range of movement that's really, really nice for us to do. And then there's a range of movement that we can do, but it's not particularly efficient. So I work really well in this space, but the further you make me go out, the more tension I feel in my shoulder blades and the more vulnerable I am when we're talking in Aikido terms. So yes, it's all of that stuff, Nico. It's alignment, it's feeling comfortable, it's everything, all of that stuff. Coming back to the purpose though. So what is the purpose of centering? Because we haven't answered that yet. And I can't believe that we haven't answered it yet.
Warren wanted to say something.
Well, this may or may not lead into what the answer is to your question, but I think that we're really not addressing, in my opinion, what centering actually is. There are two centerings that you're talking about. One is what you do when you're in a static position. For example, meditating or just standing or whatever. But I'll come back to that in a second. But overall, the centering, I think, is a...
Oh, no, don't freeze now.
Sorry?
You froze there. You said, so what centering is A, and then you froze.
Oh, I'm sorry. So
That's
it's
centering.
centering is not a static operation, but in fact a dynamic operation.
Sure.
The dynamic operation is really the intersection between two opposing forces that take place usually within your body, but doesn't have to be. And even if, and what I was going to come back to was that even when you're in a static position, you're not really in a static position. You are, in fact, dynamic within that stillness, as it were. So I go back to not just Tohei, but his teacher that we know as O-Sensei. And he talked about this a lot, but it was in code. He talked about, well, I'm not going to go into the details of that right now, but it's just suffice it to say that it was spoken about back with O-Sensei. And what you mentioned about with the practice, and you mentioned that you become, and it was, I think it was the physicist who said
Nick.
that?
Nico.
We're talking about, I think it was you. No, I'm sorry, the urologist, Pierce, right? Is that it?
Yeah.
So you said something about your son and talking about the pathways, and that goes back to the old expression that practice makes perfect. But I don't think that that is in fact the case. I think it's practice makes permanent. It takes perfect practice to make it perfect.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And of course,
So-
you can practice the wrong thing and head off in completely the wrong direction.
That's my point. So if you're practicing something imperfectly, you're never going to get it to perfect.
Yeah.
So
Well, I'd be surprised if anybody ever achieves perfection. You know,
I did
it's
once for
journey.
3 seconds.
Perfection
Really?
for 3 seconds I can live with, but perfection for life.
Please, my comment, Quentin.
Please, Steve.
Yes. I think that centering, through my experiences, brings Aikido people mind and body coordination. If you took the center away, you could not create the mind and body coordination that is required.
Yep.
And it also helped bring that as one.
Yep.
Someone wrote that it was part of what's called the rock principle. You can damage a rock, but if it's made of rubber, you can't because it moves. But if you're doing center properly, you move before the other person does, in a sense.
Okay.
So therefore, it brings it all into one.
Yeah, I certainly don't disagree with any of that. I think part of the centering process is it comes back to that working at maximum efficiency. I hope that's language I can use, Paul.
Yes.
That's what we're striving for maximum efficiency. So, and this comes to me as to why we need to do this within the practice of Aikido. There are two elements. One is that we're presented with big problems on a mat, somebody trying to lop our head off with a sword or whatever. We need to be at our best to be able to solve that particular problem. If we need to have the best chance of doing that. So being centered is really, really important. But now you've introduced a really, really important element, Warren, which is that we practice center within ourselves to know what it feels like when we're working with others. It's effortless when we work with ourselves, and ideally when we join up with partner practice, we want that same feeling. We just have, it's a center between two beings. Aikido is a dynamic process, so we practice standing still because then it's easy to experience what basic centering is about. But as we get more experience, we start to move, and the center of the movement is changing constantly. And to get on track with that is a much deeper skill. But of course, that's where Aikido is really at. Nico.
Can I just...
Go on, Alex, your microphone's off, so you can chip in.
Okay. We're talking very much about centering and physicality, effectively, and centering and the mind and physicality on the mat and for the practice. I would say that the purpose of centering is actually to help us make right choices in our daily life.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, I love that. That's
Yeah.
brilliant. Absolutely.
I'll give you an anecdote to try and explain what I mean by that. And it's from my own experience. I used to be responsible for all the money that we took through the embassy for visa receipts. And one day we were 500 rubles down. I'd signed for a certain amount. When I counted it, we're 500 rubles down. I reported it to the manager and I said, I'll make that up. The manager said, oh no, it's probably the fault of the locally engaged staff. That was Lena's till, we'll take the money from Lena. I said, no, I signed for that amount, I'll take that amount. And I will make up the difference, 500 rubles. Now, it's quite interesting. Later on, turned out that the reason for the discrepancy was a piece of paper that was in amongst the notes. And when I went through the machine, it was a note. Very technical, not a point of any great interest. Turned out the agent who'd made the payment came in and said, I've 500 rubles too much. Lo and behold, we sorted this all out, which is nice. I made what I felt was a right choice, and everybody went away at the end of the working day happy.
Yeah.
Then it was that night, we went to the Aikido dojo and I was teaching a class, and we were doing a little bit of meditation. We were sitting in Seiza, I think at one point, and I found that that night, my ability to meditate had effortlessly gone up a notch. And I would say that's a positive feedback between using a centered decision to do the right thing has then led me to a stronger sense of center in daily life. Nothing to do with really what I was doing on the mat, but the mat gave me the practice and the understanding and the feeling to allow me to make that right choice.
You said it, Alec. I mean, for me, Aikido is life, and I practice on the mat to practice off the mat. The mat is just a microcosm of life. So when we get the feeling right off the mat, we know what we're trying to achieve off the mat.
Yes.
But nobody said that you had to stop practicing when you step off the mat.
Precisely.
Yeah. So I'm totally on board with what you're saying. I want to come back to what Piers was saying about it's not just a physical component, though there is a mental component to it too. So you can achieve, I mean, broadly speaking, having looked at it, you can center physically. And I would say the first exercise we did is a good example of that. Breathing is another good example of that. You just focus on the physical practice of breathing and it does leave you feeling very centered. Perhaps sometime in this session we'll experience that. But also we can focus through our minds. So perhaps we'll do an exercise like that. We did kind of touch on it. So you can sit, you can stand, you can go into Seiza, you can do whatever you want, but whatever you choose to do, make sure that you feel you're in a good physical posture. So sit properly with a nice straight back, shoulders relaxed, hands relaxed on your laps, or sit in Seiza or stand. Make sure you're well aligned. Whatever physically feels like the right practice to do. Okay, so now I just want you to find one of your favorite spots. You know, maybe it was a holiday moment, or maybe it's sitting in the garden, or maybe it's sitting with your grandchildren, watching them play nicely, watching your favorite sporting team, whatever it happens to be, something that gives you great enjoyment, a really mega moment for you. Whatever moment you've chosen, I want you to focus on what you're seeing in that moment. What's before you? Take in the space that you're seeing in that moment. What are you hearing? What smells might be associated with it? Maybe there's a sense of touch with it as well. What are you feeling through your body as you're enjoying this moment? And hopefully as you replay this moment in your mind, you bring back the joy of that moment. Can you feel as good now as you did then? Now, why don't you self-test yourself like we did at the start of the class? Okay, when you're done, just come back to me. For those who've just joined us latterly, to self-test, join your finger and thumb, place the other finger and thumb through it, and try to part it. If you're sitting comfortably, you should be great. If you put yourself in a less comfortable position, you might find that you're able to part those things very easily. Okay, so did everybody, so when you did it feel good? Did you pass your self-test?
Yep.
Right, great. Okay, so now we're gonna go for a moment. So again, close your eyes. Try to take the same physical structure. So physically, you're good. And now pick a moment in your life that was not so good, made you angry, made you depressed, made you sad, something that was really, really, really uncomfortable for you. And I want you to recall what you heard. And what you saw. Maybe a sense of touch to that. Or smell. It could even be temperature involved. Or a feeling of being out of balance. Now test. So I can't speak for you, but I failed a test when I did that.
Yeah.
So that's a question of mind leading body. Before we did an example of body leading mind. So somebody on this made the point that Steve, it was you, Steve, saying how that they were two vital aspects that were totally integrated, and the purpose of centering was to make sure that they were totally integrated. So if your mind's one place, the body's another place, we don't work very efficiently. When we work efficiently, those two, and you can add spirit in if that works for you as well, they're all working in perfect unity, which I think is kind of interesting. Piers, did you want to say something?
No, I'm fine.
You sure?
Yep, thank you. Nico does though.
Nico, go on.
Well, I have an observation. It seems to me, especially after the exercises, that you know, when you ask the question of like, oh, nobody has actually managed to, you know, to explain, you know, why we do centering, for instance, and or we haven't really kind of broached the subject. You know, it's for me, kind of like when I'm thinking of centering, I'm always thinking of the component of the physical and mental center, and also its boundaries.
Yeah.
Because in order to have a center, you have to have boundaries, and sometimes boundaries could be like maybe a two-dimensional thing.
Yeah.
But kind of like, you know, you have the two extremes, and you're trying to be perhaps balanced between the two.
Yep.
So so you could say that perhaps like, you know, between the two extremes, we're throwing down a mental anchor. Okay, you know, because of these extremes, I know kind of like, you know, what's the extreme feeling of sadness or extreme feeling of happiness.
Yep.
Where do I want to be? And kind of like always trying to find,
Sure.
as we did with the exercise when we're kind of like either rocking or kind of like circling. But in the end, you know, where would I feel most balanced, most integrated in body and mind towards it?
I think that's an integral part of it. I mean, it is a balanced position. I think of it in just purely on the mat terms. I want to be in a position where it doesn't matter what happens where I'm equidistant, or as equidistant as I can be, to react as efficiently as I can. Does that make sense? So I've got the best chance of maximizing on the information coming my way, so I have the best chance of coming up with the most appropriate response. And personally within myself, that means I have to be in a balanced state. I have to have my mind and body integrated, and I have to be physically aligned. So absolutely, being balanced is I would say, an essential part of this process.
Yeah,
I would like to,
Yep.
sorry.
Go on.
I would like to suggest that the question as phrased is not terribly helpful. I wouldn't say that there is a purpose to centering. Centering has no purpose. You have a purpose in centering. I think it makes a difference when you focus on the person and why they center instead of suggesting that centering itself has a purpose.
Okay. Okay, well, no, I'm not thumbs upping that one. I think there is a purpose to centering. I mean, it is the state in which I'm going to operate more efficiently than if I wasn't centered. And
that's your purpose.
That is my purpose, and I think
That's
it's
right.
the purpose of most people on the mat if they're being attacked with somebody with a sword.
That's true, but it doesn't, it's like saying what's the purpose of a hammer? A hammer has no purpose. The person who built the hammer and uses it has a purpose. You could use a hammer to stir your coffee if you wanted, and that would be its purpose.
Well, okay, and that's even when I'm stirring my coffee, I want to do that as efficiently as I can, and I want to be centered to do it with the least amount of energy that I need to. So
yes, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm just saying that people, it's good, I think, to realize that the object doesn't have a purpose. Hammer can't like ice cream any more than it likes centering.
No,
but it's the person.
I am the object, Paul. And my purpose is to be as efficient as I can, as often as I can. That doesn't seem to be a silly purpose to have.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm suggesting that centering has a purpose leads you in the wrong direction sometimes. Centering, it's how each person centers and what each person wants. It's not that centering always has this purpose.
Well, I think there's an infinite variety of ways to center. That's for sure. We tend to be quite boring in how we experience it on the mat, in my experience, but doing verbal Aikido, we get different people to do centering exercise every week, and it's never the same. It's always different, although there are similar components to it.
Quentin?
Yeah.
One of the things I've always thought about centering is that it actually restores us to our natural state. I mean, we're very powerful creatures. We evolved over millions of years. Our ancestors survived in some of the toughest environments you could possibly imagine. And if you look around us at the animal world, at the sheer level of power and movement and coordination and things that other animals just take for granted, but we've got it as well. Yeah. And I think we evolved to have these big and busy brains, so we're quite cognitively busy, aren't we? And when we center, I think we literally put the clock back 1 million years and we discover powers within ourselves that we've otherwise forgotten.
What does everybody else feel about that? I think there's some truth in it.
I certainly think,
if you think about an animal that's fearful, that's when everything gets mobilized. It seems to move incredibly efficiently to get away from whatever it's making it fearful. It doesn't get stuck in one place unless maybe it's a rabbit. Any other thoughts? Joanna?
I was going to say that what it does is it quietens, for me, is it quietens all the voices in your head. Now, I don't know if I'm alone in this experience of having lots of voices in my head. And when you're centered, they calm down. And the anecdote I told earlier, one of the voices that calmed down was the voice that tells me all the bad things I've done during the day and the decisions I could have made better. Suddenly that voice wasn't there. I didn't have to worry about that voice so much. So suddenly my ability to center myself and meditate suddenly, whoosh, improved.
Piers, was it you who was talking about sort of coming to a sense of emptiness, Mushin, with two?
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, there's that component to it. There's kind of you're just throwing away all the extraneous noise, and just from a position of quiet, you can hear everything, can't you? So that's what I mean about it's a place where you pick up maximum information. If you're quiet, you hear more, you feel more, you smell more, you see more, become more aware. So there is that sense of emptiness about it. Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Joanna?
I was thinking about this centering as a process of back and forth. So I'm in my daily life, I'm not center, and then I need to get center again. And then in a couple of minutes or half an hour, I will change the situation or what am I doing or my environment, and then I'll get off balance again. And then say, okay, I need to get back again. It's something, it's about movement, it's about changing. So you change, you get out of center, and then you get back to center. It's coming and going. I was thinking about that. And each day, every practice we have, even on the mat, it's different. It's not that I'm getting from work to the dojo to practice, and then I'll leave the dojo completely centered. It's each day is one, and each partner that I practice, it's one person.
So here's a quote from O-Sensei. My students think I don't lose my center, but that's not true. I just recognize it sooner and get back quicker.
I was going to say that. That reminded me of exactly that quote.
So none of us are perfect, and we all lose center at times. I certainly did today, I can tell you. I'm not going to go there, but I did. And I think it's just a question of, as we practice more, we become more mindful and we notice it. And we provide ourselves with the techniques to get back there. So it can be just touching your one point or saying center. In fact, okay, so let's try this. I don't know what's going to happen, okay, but we'll try it. So make sure you're sitting comfortably, and you can close your eyes if you like. And all I want you to do is say center, center, center in your head or out loud as you like. Just keep saying the word. And then self-test. Okay. You're nodding your head, Alex. So you did it work for you?
No, I found I was nagging myself.
Yes, it's nagging yourself into it. It never works for me either.
Okay. I don't mind nagging myself. It reinforces it. Okay, so let's try this then. This time you're going to say, I've lost my balance, I've lost my balance, I've lost my balance. What did you find?
Nagging myself again. Doesn't work for me.
Well, as I said, okay, different methods don't work for all people. You've got to find what works for you in terms of center, but maybe just saying a word like center. So doing verbal Aikido, we're doing all these long practices at the start of the lesson, taking 5 minutes to center. And Luke, the guy who leads the session, said, well, what do you do to center? And I just said, well, I just say center. And I'm kind of there, you know, but that's because I know what it, you know, long years of practice, I know what that means, and I just get there most of the time. That's all I need to do. But other times I might need to breathe for a few minutes to get there, if I'm really upset, for example. Okay, so let's try another one. We're going to try the breathing, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to breathe very, very fast. You're going to pant. Now test.
Fergus does well.
Yeah, if only he could put his thumb and his finger together. Okay, so now you're going to slow your breathing right down. Focus on taking those deep belly breaths. Slow in and slow out. Now test. Okay, so I'm solid on the second one. I broke on the first one. Why? Why does that maybe work?
Well, because you're unnaturally breathing when you're panting, especially if you're not. If you're not, it's not a natural pant. It's a forced pant.
Okay, when's the sort of occasion when we would naturally pant?
Well, you might pant if you're very hot, or you might pant if you've ran.
If you're physically exerted, you're extreme, or maybe if you're fearful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. When might you really deep slow breathe? Because that's not a natural state during the day either.
No, but then when you do that, then you're calming down, relaxing, meditating.
So what do we associate with long deep breath?
Exactly.
Meditation, sleeping,
absolutely,
relaxation. Okay, so our mind, our body is triggered, you know, by just breathing. We bring about the associated states that we might
Absolutely.
link to the sort of things where that does happen naturally. It's not that I'm fearful when I asked you to pant. I wasn't, but I'm not in a very efficient state because my mind's thinking, "What's going on here?" I think it's interesting how the mind unconsciously affects the body as well as consciously can affect the body. Yeah. Okay, so has anybody got anything that they would like? Ah, Nico.
Sorry about that. Basically, kind of like I just had an idea. You can still have efficient movement when you're still panting. Doesn't mean that like just because you may be at a state where you are half dead. This doesn't mean that like you cannot run and kind of like have your wits about you, or for example, kind of produce amazingly efficient and high endurance.
Yeah.
So it's always it always comes down to the state of mind you want to be in. You want to be in a panic state of mind, and therefore kind of your body perhaps will try to kind of catch up with this kind of like hyperventilation of the mind. So the body kind of tries to also match that, or you're actively trying to become calm.
But also, Nico, what you're saying is absolutely right. And what I said was, we were artificially panting. But if you've just run a 100-meter race and you've won it, you're panting, but you're so exhilarated and you're totally relaxed and you're in the moment. Exactly. You're totally, one with yourself. So that there's no negative connotation with that at all.
I agree. Because I tried to do the test, and I couldn't open the because I knew in my mind that I'm just artificially trying to invoke something, but it's not happening naturally. And if it were to happen naturally, I still have to be aware of why it occurred and what do I have to do in order, for example, bring down my my breathing, for example, or maintain kind of like a maximal oxygen intake. So it's always a state of mind that we're trying to, in the end, we're trying to conquer.
So feeding off what Warren said earlier, I remember I came back and I said, well, we start by practicing centering, standing completely still, because that's, like any basic test, that's the easiest place to capture the feeling when there are less distractions around. And then we have to keep this feeling of center within ourselves when we're practicing with others. That's the next level up. And then the next level up is with movement, and then more dynamic movement, and then going absolutely full bore, and then being able to go full bore for longer and longer and longer and still keep our center. So I think you could level that at any sport or pursuit like that. We're looking to push ourselves to our limits and still be able to perform optimally for as long as whatever the stimulus is going on. So I'm not saying breathing fast in itself means that you definitely will lose center, but it's a component of it. We don't normally breathe like that in good circumstances. So for some, that's distracting enough for them to lose their center. It wasn't for you, because you had this other idea in mind.
So it always comes back to us, kind of like,
Yeah, I think that's
how are we anchoring ourselves to what kind of reality, perhaps, or what do we want to achieve through our,
absolutely.
the centering.
What's the difference between the number one sportsman and the guy that never quite, or girl, who never quite makes it? It's the guy, it's because they're able to stay centered and focused on the goal, I would suggest. Because when you're looking at top golfers, Jamie, I hope you're there and you can come in on this. The difference between their technical skill level, I would say, is virtually nil at the top level. It's the difference between what's going on between their ears that makes the difference, makes a champion or not.
Entirely true. I'm writing a whole book about it. An entire book. This is a huge subject, and but it's also very simple, and it's absolutely vital. Centering is the center. It's the core. And just finished today, just a few minutes ago, the Golf Mastery School, and it's all about center. There's a beautiful haiku from O-sensei where he said, "Move like a beam of light, whirl in circles around a stable center." And it describes Aikido. It certainly describes a golf swing. And we were talking about the image, and it's an image, there's a lot of different images of the sun in the center of the solar system. It keeps us in orbit. We wouldn't be here if we didn't have a sun solidly in the center of the solar system. If it was skipping and moving around, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. We'd be like this, yeah? So, and that center needs to be strong. Another image is the revolving doors of a building, like a big, apartment building or whatever. And that has this super strong central column, and it's hydraulic, which is interesting, so that it's going so steadily around. And what's really interesting is if you push hard to try to go faster in a revolving door or get in the building quicker, it doesn't work. It pushes you back. And you can't push it. You can't use force, and you can't make it go faster. You have to have this perfect kind of timing as you get in, you're going around, and you just have to be in timing and tempo and rhythm. And that's one of the things that center does for us. In a golf swing, it certainly does that. In an Aikido technique, if you're up here, the minute you're in the upper body rather than lower body, and there's a lot of connections, the center to our lower body, it's in our belly, it goes to our legs, lots of stuff. But, that's where you need to be. And like as a skier, or a horseback rider, but a skier, if you put your pole down and then your feet, that's when you lose your balance and you fall over. It's feet, pull, feet, hands, and that's around this center. You're going like this all the time. So, I mean, it's just absolutely everywhere. It's absolutely vital. It has every component: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and it keeps us from forcing, and it keeps us from getting out of rhythm, and it keeps us from getting out of balance, and then it allows us to operate properly. And I love what O-sensei said: move like a beam of light. And this is then you can get into circles, squares, and triangles and all these things and how do they relate. But we move like a beam of light and we get centered. You can have a sword that's centered, right? So you get that move like a beam of light. You have all the focus, all the concentrated power, all the intention, all the target, all the focus, all the goal, but you whirl in circles around a stable center. So I think he kind of said it all right there in that haiku. And there's so much. Again, I'm writing all about this, but it's an absolutely vital topic, and I think it's the centrality of centering is you can't get away from. And to Paul's point, we center. I mean, it's there, but unless we're conscious of it and we do it, and it's been there our whole lives. It's been there in all the lives of people who don't do Aikido or yoga or whatever practices or meditation that they're doing to center. It's there, but we have to do these things consciously. And when we do, then we get all the benefits of what centering is, and people have been talking about them.
So yeah, thank you, Jamie. That's wonderful. One of the things that we always think of, well, I, from Ki Aikido, think of Toei Sensei and his Keep One Point, but where did he get it from? He got it from Nakamura Tempu Sensei, who founded Japanese yoga. And where did he get it from? He got it from a yogi in India while trying to cure his tuberculosis. And how long's yoga been going? Thousands of years. And do you think they invented it? Probably not. They probably got it from somebody. So this is, as you said, it's absolutely central to life, and it's ancient wisdom.
Somebody who created the universe created it. It's built in. It's built in, and it's built into us. And it's kind of interesting when you start looking at the universe. It's this one big, huge thing. And, so is there a center of the universe? Is there a center of black holes? I mean, you start thinking about all these things. But, where we are, we have everything has a vantage point. So the Earth does, we do, a star out there, another galaxy, every has a place, and it's our own reference point. And then things kind of organize around that. So, it's a principle that is everywhere. And it's really a principle of spirit or energy into form. And that's the whole thing. Anything gets form, it gets a center.
Well, if the universe is infinite, then we're all the center. Oh, yes. Okay, so I'm going to give you a final exercise unless more comments come. So this time, I'd like you to shut your eyes, and I want you to imagine that you're surrounded by this perfect bubble, and you're right in the center of this perfect bubble. Right in the center of the sphere. Bright light in the center of the sphere. And as you focus on that image, do that self-test. Hopefully you passed. Okay, so just as an opposite to that, again, just shut your eyes. So you can see the sphere this time, but this time you're clinging to the outside for all your worth to just hold on to it. You're on the outside now, struggling to hold on and test. So I don't know how you found that. But it's hard to stay centered when you imagine yourself not in the center anymore. Okay, so as I say, I'm going to open up for final comments, but I really think we covered our basis tonight. It's an incredibly deep subject whilst being incredibly simple at the same time. So as you said, Jamie, it's so fundamental and basic. It's so much a part of life that, hey, what's there to discuss? But actually there is everything to discuss. I think we kind of often, especially in the Ki Aikido tradition, because we have this keep one point notion, we kind of take it for granted and we don't think beyond it very much. And there is a lot to think about. And if this discussion helped do that, then fantastic.
Brenton, I have one final comment, which is the exercise you started with, where we were going forward and going back and going sideways. Didn't do it in Ki Aikido, but our yoga teacher made us do that for years.
All right, okay, that's interesting.
I think that's a yoga exercise.
Yeah, well, centering definitely is not unique to Aikido. You know, you find it in so many arts, all arts probably. Dan.
When was the first time you actually held your Aiki extensions course? I'm just trying to relate back in terms of time.
I would say around 2014.
2014. Because that for me is when centering became very relevant to my Aikido. And the story behind that is one certain young Mr. Paul Linden having a chuckabout in what they think was a private room, but I managed to walk in. It was a private chuck around with himself and Philip Smith. And for people that don't know Philip Smith, obviously they'll know Paul Linden. There's a huge size disparity between the two. And for me, it actually showed the benefits of centering in Aikido, because I'm quite certain that with all of Paul's experience and years, if he was just depending on technique, then it really wouldn't work with Phil at all. But with the benefit of his body movement and centering, you could actually see that Philip was reliant on Paul for his balance during those techniques, and Paul was taking that away, and it just showed how beautiful centering was.
Yeah.
Thank you. I never thought of myself as being that good, but maybe I am. Who knows?
It was superb, Paul. I still remember it to this day. I still talk about it.
And it does bring us back to what Warren was saying about, you know, well, he didn't use this phrase, but center-to-center connection with another person. And doing all our technique from center, you know, it's where our power comes from.
I just gave you a YouTube link. Just in the last month or so, I did a short video. It's about 7 minutes or something, essential centering. So you can just go there. I just was sharing with my golf students in the Golf Mastery School that is relevant to this. So in golf, in everything, we need to make centered contact. You're looking for that in a deal. I mean, that's the sweet spot, right? Called the sweet spot. So you make centered contact on the face of the club. And one of the things with golfers is that they make centered contact on a random basis, which is what is so incredibly frustrating to golfers. It's like a couple good ones, bad ones. You never know what's coming out, the one that keeps you coming back for more. And so one of my teachings is that if I'm centered and I move in a properly centered sequential way, I ought to make centered contact. So centered plus centered ought to equal centered. And when you're swaying and you're lifting and you're off balance and you're moving all over the place, you get centered contact once in a while on a random basis. And to improve, seriously, if you up those percentages on a more consistent basis, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70%, you're making centered contact, you're already a better golfer. When you miss, you don't miss it so much here and there, and maybe you're in the rough, you're not off out of bounds or in the woods or on a hazard or something. And so you know, it really shows up everywhere. And it's kind of like an enlightenment. It's like, oh, centered plus centered equals centered. I make centered contact if I was centered, and start doing that more regularly in your speech and your conversations and your relationships and your work, everything you're doing. You'll make centered contact. You'll be in the sweet spot a whole lot more. So it's one way to think about it. And, you know, life gets sweeter when you're hitting the sweet spot.
A real quick story about that. A friend of mine was teaching an Aikido class at a university in California. It was a summer day, so they went out on the lawn. Unfortunately, the golf people were there first. So my friend was waiting for them to finish, and he said to a friend of his, "That doesn't look so hard." So the golf instructor heard him, gave him a club, said, "You try it." He swung, got a hole in one, and said, "It isn't that hard," and gave it back, and was smart enough not to try again.
Yeah, it's a great story. And the truth is, it's shot after shot after shot after shot. It's a home run of golf. It's all day long. And then you got another day and another day. And, you know, we have our one flash of glory, and you didn't even know what you did to make it happen. And that's what golfers say. It's like, I don't even know what I did. So, well, what good is that if it's not repeatable? If you can't produce it and produce it at will. And the way you start producing that at will is what we call training. And we train our centeredness. We train our balance. And you produce it more at will and more consistently and more often, because unfortunately it's not one shot, you know. There's a lot of days and a lot of situations and a lot, and you know, we got to live our lives.
At will, I can always not know what I did.
I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can, Paul.
Just to say that, you know, as I said, there are as many centerings as there are people in the world. But find your own ways of getting there, and when you notice that you're not, use what you have, because there are plenty of techniques. Anyway, thank you so much for being here. I think it's a really important topic. I think it's a good one to be posting generally and make people think a bit. Hopefully it made you think a bit, and yeah, very useful. Great.
Thank you, Quentin.
Thank you, Quentin.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you again.
Bye-bye.